Hey, what's going on everyone? So it's Dennis Ivy here and I'm filling in for yet another video on Brad's channel, and in this one I'm going to be teaching you about WebRTC while we build out two awesome video calling applications. So what I'm going to do here is first give you a high level overview of what WebRTC is and how it works, and then we're going to move on to our first project to implement everything that we learned. So the first project is going to be a simple peer-to-peer video calling application, and in this project we're just going to have a lobby where we can go ahead and join a room and invite another user with some kind of room ID into our room. So in this room you're going to be able to have video calling functionality like muting your mic, toggling the camera, and that's about it for that application. And all in all, that project is going to take up about an hour and 10 minutes of this video. Now, in the second part, we're going to move on to a group video calling application. Now, this second project is going to take up a little bit more time in the video, and that is because of all of the functionality that I added into it. I really wanted to make this special, so in this project, we have a group video calling application with the ability to actually have full controls along with the ability to share your screen. With that, we're also going to be able to see all the room participants and have real-time chat inside of that room. So users can actually communicate in real time. And one of the cool things I wanted to add in here is that feeling for like a Discord clone, maybe a Twitter Spaces application where users can join the application and all their video frames will be in those little circles. And if you actually click on one of those circles, you can actually put a user into focus and then switch between any user that you want to put into that frame. And then you can also go back into group video calling mode where everybody is inside of that frame. One thing I wanted to mention is that there should be a link to the live demo down in the video description for project number 2. So if you want to go ahead and test that out, I'd highly recommend checking it out before getting started and just check out all the features and see how things work before we continue. So with that being said, while project number 1 does use WebRTC, project number 2 will use a third-party service called Agora. So Agora will give us an SDK for the group video calling functionality along with real-time messaging. And Agora is a paid service, but they do have a great free tier that gives us 10,000 free use minutes each month. And that should be more than enough to complete this video and have your own demo. So test that out. And Agora actually does not require a credit card on file to get started. So anybody should be able to go ahead and get started. Now, if you're only interested in one of the projects in this video, I'm going to make sure there's timestamps down in the video description so you can actually find out where we work on each project and just skip through, because project number 1 and project number 2 don't have anything to do with each other. So you can actually start straight with project number 2 and continue there. So if you're here just for WebRTC, you can only complete the first part. You don't have to worry about the second part, or you can just go ahead and start at part 2. So now that we have that taken care of, let's go ahead and run through a couple of slides, and we're just going to go ahead and do an introduction to WebRTC, and I'll give you that high level overview before we get started with project number 1. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that these slides right here will be linked to the video description if you want to access them, along with a detailed article to go with this. So that'll be all linked up. You can go ahead and check that out once the video is posted, and let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, what is WebRTC? So as I have it in the definition here, WebRTC is a set of JavaScript APIs that allows us to establish a peer-to-peer connection between two browsers to exchange data such as audio and video, all in real time. So this is real-time communication. So the thing that makes WebRTC so special is the fact that the connection is between two browsers, and the data that transmits between the browsers never actually reaches a server. So it doesn't mean that we don't need a server involved at all. But as this picture shows right here, let's say we have two clients, that data is transmitted directly once a connection is made and never has to reach that server. So this makes WebRTC ideal for exchanging audio and video, because any latency that would be added by having to hit the server first would actually cause a slight delay. So I know some of you are thinking, if it's real-time communication, this sounds a lot like WebSockets. So WebSockets and WebRTC are similar in a lot of aspects. So I want to break down what WebSockets are and how that functions, and then we'll make some comparisons on when you might want to use one over the other. So WebSockets, the connection is peer to server right here. So we have a browser to server connection versus WebRTC, where the connection is browser to browser. So one is peer to peer, one is peer to server. So they both allow us to communicate in real time. But with WebSockets, let's say peer 1 right here wanted to send a chat message to peer 2. They would send the message, that message would go to the server and then out to peer 2. Now if peer 2 wants to respond, they would send that message to the server and then out to peer 1. So there's a little bit of latency with WebSockets and having to first go to the server, but it happens so fast that half a second or maybe a second wouldn't really make much of a difference for something like a chat message or a notification. But if we wanted to send audio and video data through WebSockets, that latency would be very noticeable. I'm sure we've all been on a call or seen a video where the two people are talking, there's a little bit of latency and they're talking over each other. So that creates a pretty big issue right there. So this is where WebRTC thrives. So by not having to reach the server first, the connection is directly between the two browsers, and that video data can be exchanged or audio data can be exchanged much faster. Now with that, WebRTC uses UDP as its protocol to transport the data, and UDP is very fast, and more on that in a second. So if WebRTC is so fast, why would we need WebSockets if they both give us real-time communication and one can transfer data faster for us? It seems like WebRTC is the optimal path here. Any more speed in our application always seems like a better thing here. So there's some limitations to WebRTC, so let's talk about this and then when you might want to use one over the other. So first of all, WebRTC uses UDP, and UDP is not a reliable protocol for transferring important data. So the way UDP works is that it sends data really fast, but it never validates if the data was received. So because of that, if we're sending something like an audio or video data, if we lose a couple of frames from our video, it's no big deal. It'll catch up. Your video might look a little bit funny for a second, but everything will turn out and it's not a big issue. If we're sending something like a file to someone, if we lose a couple of bytes of data from that file, that entire file can be corrupted. So because of that, UDP is not reliable. You would not want to use it for sending important data. Now, also with WebRTC, there is no built-in signaling. So this means that you can't just use WebRTC and make a connection. WebRTC actually leaves it up to us to make that initial connection. And then once a connection is made, then WebRTC takes over. So this is where WebSockets and WebRTC actually go good together. We would use a process called signaling. With WebSockets, we would send the information between the two peers, the connection's made, and then WebRTC takes over. So WebRTC has its limitations in that way. So how does all of this work? So I'm going to give you a quick example first, and then we'll actually start breaking down the details of this. But at a high level overview, we have two peers, and if they want to communicate, we would have one peer initiate a connection, and they would say, hey, you want to chat? And they would have to send this message out to peer two. So they would send out a message. It doesn't matter how it's done. This can be done through signaling. They can send that message through an email, a tweet. It's irrelevant, but that message would contain some information about this peer right here. So they would have to send their network information to peer two. Now, if peer two accepts this offer, they would go ahead and send some information back to peer one. The means of communication right now is not relevant, but the second that information is exchanged, data can begin to flow, and now the two peers do not need a server involved. They can start transmitting data. So this can be audio and video data, and that connection is made. So what exactly are we sending between the two peers, and how are we sending this data? So as I mentioned earlier, that means of communication in the beginning is actually irrelevant. That could be a tweet or an email, but usually this is through a process called signaling. That's a more practical way of putting this into an application. And that can be through WebSockets or some kind of third-party signaling service. It doesn't really matter. So you'd get the two peers in some kind of room so they can at least know about each other. Then they would transmit the initial data. Now, in that data, there are two main components. There's a session description protocol, an SDP, and some ICE candidates. So first of all, both peers will need to exchange a session description protocol, one in the form of an offer, one in the form of an answer. And a session description protocol is simply an object containing some kind of information about both peers, usually like the codec, address, media type, audio, and video. So just a bunch of information about your network and how to connect to you. So both peers will need to know about each other's network. Now, along with exchanging session description protocols between the two peers, both peers will also exchange a series of ICE candidates, and an ICE candidate is simply a public IP address and port that could be potentially used as an address to receive data. So each peer will typically have multiple ICE candidates that are gathered by making a series of requests to a stun server, and they are exchanged between the two peers. So we'll actually get into this exchange process and we'll go more into detail about what's happening. So exchanging session description protocols and ICE candidates. So right here, we have two peers right here, and we have a server, and then we also have stun servers that we're going to connect to. So we'll go through that process again, the one that we went through in that high level overview. And the first peer will say, hey, let's connect. Here's my session description protocol. So it'll be sent to the server through a signaling process, and sent to peer 2. Now peer 2 will receive that SDP and they can accept it and they'll say, hey, sure, here's my SDP, let's connect. The second that's exchanged, the two peers are connected, but data can't start flowing yet. They've simply made that connection. So before data can start flowing between the two peers, we still need to coordinate the discovery of our public IP addresses. So that's because most devices nowadays sit behind firewalls and NAT devices. So to do this, we're going to use a method called ICE. So this means we're going to make a series of requests to a stun server, get our ICE candidates, and then transfer them between the two peers. And a stun server is not something that you're going to have to worry about setting up. It's really cheap and easy to maintain. So there's a lot of public stun servers, and in our example, we'll use a Google stun server. So let's go ahead and continue with this process. So what's going to happen here is once the SDP offer and answer are exchanged, this peer right here will go ahead and ask the stun server, hey, what's my public IP address? Now the stun server will reply and they'll send over a series of ICE candidates to this peer, and this peer will send over the ICE candidates to peer 2. Now peer 2 will do the same. They're going to go ahead and make a request to the stun server and say, hey, what's my IP address or public IP? Stun server will respond and the ICE candidates are exchanged. Now, once we find or the network finds an optimal path to communicate through with these ICE candidates, data can start flowing between the two peers and that entire connection is complete. Now, I wanted to talk about one more thing, and that is trickling ICE candidates. So how you send over ICE candidates is up to you, but there's a few ways you can go about doing this. And let's go ahead and take a look at this process all over again, and I'll try to break this down. So when we first create our SDP offer, we also make a series of requests to a stun server to generate our ICE candidates. Now, what we could do is create our SDP offer, wait till all our ICE candidates are generated, and then send over the SDP offer and the ICE candidates all together. Now, more traditionally, what you want to do is not have to wait for this process to complete. You want to send over your SDP offer and then trickle in your ICE candidates as they're created. So you'll notice that we sent over the SDP offer and then we don't get back our ICE candidates in a batch. They're sent over individually. So we would signal over each ICE candidate over to our peer as they are generated. So we would send over the offer, send over an ICE candidate and another, and then that process would continue. So that is called trickling ICE, and we're actually going to run through this. So it's going to help us fix a little bit of a delay here. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And I want to show you this in action before we start coding. So I have a live demo here. So this is actually a GIF in that live demo. And let's go ahead and click on this and go over how this exchange works between the SDP offer and answer. So let's go ahead and open this up, make sure my camera's on. So the GIF is actually at the top of the link right here. So here I am, this is all live right now. Source code is all here. And what I'm gonna do here is open up two tabs side by side. So I wanna make a connection between two peers. Okay, so we have peer 1 and peer 2. So if we go through these instructions, what we're gonna do is first create an offer. So this is what an offer looks like. So I'm going to create an offer, and you see this object right here is just a bunch of gibberish about our network. We're just going to go ahead and copy the entire offer, and I'm going to paste this over to peer 2. So we're creating an offer from peer 1. Peer 1 will initiate that offer, pass it over to peer 2, and this is the more manual way of doing this. You wouldn't actually do this in a real application. I'm just trying to, or I built the demo so you can see that exchange process. So peer 2 will get this offer, and then we're going to create an answer. So whenever we add in an offer here from peer 1, let's go ahead and create an answer from peer 2. So now we have an answer, and you can see the object. One's an offer, one's an answer. Let's go ahead and copy this entire answer and send it to peer 2. Okay, so we've exchanged those. And once we've exchanged the offer and answer, I'm going to go ahead and add the answer to peer 2. And now we see a connection. Both peers are connected. So we have peer 1 and peer 2, and then peer 2 and peer 1 right here. Okay, so one thing you'll notice is there was no ICE candidates exchange at this point, and that's because we're not using signaling. So by the time the ICE candidates were generated, they were actually added to the offer. So I didn't need to actually generate those on my own. Those were created, so I didn't have to actually send those over because we're not using signaling. So that's the demo. Check this out before you get started, and let's go ahead and get right into coding this. Okay, so let's start with a quick walkthrough of project number 1 before we start building this out. So this is my room right here. It's full screen, and here are my controls, and here is the room name. So it's simply a parameter added in the URL. So at this point, I have full control here with my camera, and I can toggle this on and off with a mic. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave the room. And to create a room, we can just go ahead and add in any value here. Let's go ahead and give it a name, and we're just going to call this test. So this is peer-to-peer. I can only have one other person in this room. And let's say I want to share this URL with someone and I want to tell them to join the room. I'll just go ahead and give them the URL to the website. Let's say they try to join the room without an extra parameter here, so no room name. It's going to redirect them back to the lobby. So the room name is test here, so they're going to have to add that in here. So we'll just go ahead and do test. And here we go. They are now in the room. So we have 2 peers in the room, and here are my full controls. Sorry about the quality. It's going to take a minute to adjust. We do actually cover this in the video where we exchange or change up the video size here, but we don't go into much detail about it. So here we have 2 peers. Both peers can see each other. So if I go ahead and mute the camera here for peer 1, the entire camera feed will be hidden here. So my current user where I'm at is always going to be in the top left, and peer number 2, so the person I'm talking to, will always be in the big frame. So that's why right here, if this peer has their camera muted, we're not going to see anything here. So if I unmute this, we're actually going to see that video frame. So that goes both ways, and both peers can actually have full controls here. So if I'm inside of this room right here, or let's say peer 1 is inside of their application and peer 2 leaves, what's going to happen here is my video frame's automatically going to go into full screen and peer 1 leaves. So we can join a room and leave it, and that's pretty much the application. So let's go ahead and close this out and start building this. Okay, so we're going to be building this project out from scratch. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and create an empty folder on my desktop and give it a name, and I'll just call my project Peer Chat. So once I have this folder, I'll open this up inside of my text editor. I'm using VS Code here, and I'm just going to go ahead and find the project folder right here and open things up. So here's my project. I'll close this out, and the first thing I want to do is go ahead and add in an index.html file. That's going to be our room page eventually, and then I'll add in a main.css file and a main.js file. Okay, so inside of the index.html file, I'm going to set up that boilerplate HTML code. So in VS Code, if I start typing in HTML, I should get this drop-down select menu. I'll click this one right here, and that should build all of this out for me. So if you don't get this, just go ahead and type it out from scratch, follow along with this video, pause it, whatever you need to do here. So for the CSS file and the JavaScript file, those are already linked up because I'm using the same name here. So the file path is all set, so we have our main.js and main.css. But what I like to do is I like to get this script tag right here and bring this down below my closing body tag. Okay, so we have this, and next I want to go ahead and build out our video frames and the container for those. So we'll create a div here, and this div is going to have the ID of videos. So this will hold the 2 video frames. We're doing only peer-to-peer, so it's not going to be group video calling. We're only doing a peer-to-peer connection. So inside of this, we're going to use a video tag. And inside of this video tag, I'm going to go ahead and give it the class of video-player. And then for the ID, we'll just give it an ID of user-1. So we're only going to have a user1 and user2. Now, for the other properties here, we're just going to go ahead and do autoplay. So autoplay, and then we'll do plays in line. Okay, so once we have this tag right here, we'll go ahead and copy this, bring it down here, and we're just going to change this to user2. So we have our 2 users, and that looks good. So that's all we need inside of our HTML template right here for now. So let's go into our main.css, and I just want to make sure that we can see this, that we're actually outputting this, and then we'll actually start adding in our camera stream or video feed into these tags here. So inside of main.css, let's go ahead and grab our videos tag, or the video frame, the container, and then we're just going to go ahead and display it as a grid. And for this, for the actual columns, we'll do grid template columns of 1 fraction and 1 fraction. So I just want to make sure that both videos take up exactly half of that container. So we'll just go 1 fraction, 1 fraction. That's going to make that 50% each for each container. Now we'll also want to make sure that there's some space between them. So we'll do gap of 2 EM, and that's it for the videos. So for the actual video containers, so for these elements right here, for the video player, let's go ahead and grab this, and we'll style this so we can actually see this. So we'll do video-player. And for this, we're just going to go ahead and set a background color so we can actually see it. So we'll make this black, and then for the width, we're just going to set this to 100%. So I just want to make sure that the width is full width of that container right here. So I'll let the actual column specify the width of that video player. So we'll set that to 100%, and for the height, let's just do 300 pixels for now, and we'll leave it at that. So we'll save this, and let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I'm going to use live server. We'll open up our index.html file, give it a second, And this is what you should have right here. So we should just have those two players and that's it. And the next thing I want to do is output my camera's video stream inside of our page here. So I want to get access to my camera's audio and video and output it here. So for this, let's jump back into our code here and let's move on to our main.js file. So in here, I want to create a variable for my local stream and I'll leave it undefined, and then one for my remote stream. So local stream will be my local camera's video feed and my microphone's audio. And then the remote stream, once we're connected to another user, that will be that remote user's camera and audio data. So once we have that, let's go ahead and create a function called init, and let's make sure it's an async function. So with this function, we're just gonna go ahead and call this right away. So this will be the function that starts everything up. And when we load our page, what's the first thing that we want to happen? So typically when you go to a website that takes your camera's audio and video, usually it has to request permission and actually get access to that. So we're going to call a function that's actually going to ask for permission for access to our camera's video and audio, and then we're going to go ahead and actually add this to the DOM. So for this, we're going to call local stream, and then we're going to set this value to await navigator.mediadevices.getUserMedia. So the getUserMedia function, what this is going to do is this will actually request permission to our camera feed and our audio, and we can actually pass in the parameters and what we want access to. So for now, we'll just do video. This will be true, so we do want access to the video. And for audio, we can also set this to true, but for now, I'm gonna set this to false because when we're testing this, I don't wanna hear an echo back inside of the mic. So I just wanna make sure that it doesn't mess with us, but we'll change this later. So we want access to the camera, but not the audio. So that's what this will do, and it will actually set this value inside of local stream. So once we have this, and I'll actually go over where you can find these functions in a second, so let's just finish this up. So once we have access to that, let's go ahead and call document.get element by ID, and we're just going to get user1. So this is going to be our camera's audio and video feed, and the video tag has a property called source object, and we're just going to set this to local stream. So I'm going to save this, and this specifically is to this video tag. So once we have that, let's just go ahead and test this out. So let's open this up here, and I'm going to refresh the page, and it looks like I've already accessed or denied the camera's audio and video because I think it refreshed it by default. So this is actually a good teaching moment. We're going to go ahead and go into settings, and we'll go into privacy and security. We'll go into site settings, and we're just going to go into camera. So we're just going to go ahead and remove this. So by default, it already blocked access. We're just going to remove that. And then now on that first load, this is what you're going to see. So that's what that function calls. It actually requests access to our camera. So once we allow this, we should see our camera feed in a second, and there we go. So now you can see me. We've successfully displayed our camera's video feed here. So we don't have the audio right now. So let's open this up in another tab here. So now we have two users, but the two users can't see each other. So we haven't created that peer-to-peer connection. All we did was got access to our camera and displayed it. So let's move on to that in the next section here. So before we do that though, I want to go ahead and show you where you can find these functions, because in your projects, you're probably not going to be doing the same exact thing that I'm doing eventually. So you want to be able to actually find this. So I'll show you a great resource for this. So let's go to WebRTC, or let's do a search. And in this site right here, I'm going to go ahead and link this up in the video description. This is where you're going to find access to everything. So if we look down here, here are all the functions. We're going to use this RTC peer connection function, read about it, see how to use it, and this will tell you a lot more. So I'm not going to go into the details about all of these. I'm going to expect you to do that research, but I just want to make sure you know where to find it. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this out, and let's move on to the next section. Okay, so now it's time to start the process of connecting two peers together and creating an offer, and then sending that offer over to the other peer along with the ICE candidates. So let's go ahead and create another function right here just below the init function, and let's call this create offer. So when we first load up our page and another peer joins, we want to create an offer and send it over to them. So we'll create the function. Let's make sure it's a async function here. And the first thing we want to do inside of our create offer function is create the initial peer connection here. So we're going to create a variable called peer connection, and we're going to set this right here inside of create offers. So we're going to create a new peer connection, and essentially this is that interface that stores all the information between us and that remote peer, and it provides us with a bunch of methods to actually connect to that peer. So this will be that core interface to actually connect to another user. So we're going to go ahead and set this up, and we're going to call this new RTC peer connection. We'll call the function, and there we go. So in create offer, we're going to establish that peer connection object. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna get our remote stream, and we just wanna set up a media stream inside of this video player 2 right here. So inside of this other video tag, we wanna set up the media data or the actual media stream, and then we'll add data to it later. So we're just gonna go ahead and do new media stream. We're gonna call this, and then we're gonna do the same thing that we did right here. So we're gonna take this right here, paste this below, and set this to user 2, and then take our remote stream and set it up. So again, there's no actual video feed in there just yet because we haven't gotten that from our user, but we're setting it up and just creating it and making sure it's ready for that. So once we create our peer connection and set up our media stream, let's go ahead and actually create an offer. So we're gonna go ahead and create a variable called offer, and this is gonna be await peer connection. So this is what's given us access to all these methods right here. We're gonna call peer connection dot create offer. So each peer connection will have an offer and an answer. We're creating that offer, and then we're just gonna go ahead and go to our peer connection, and we're gonna set the local description. So we are the local description. So we're going to peer connection dot set local description, and we're throwing in our offer. So every peer connection is gonna have an offer and answer. Okay, so once we have that, let's just go ahead and console this out. So we'll do console.log, and let's just see our offer. And I just want to show you what it looks like right now. So we'll just do offer, and let's just go ahead and call this. So at this point, I'm just going to call this on init. So we're going to call it immediately once we load up our page. So if I go in here, let's open this up, refresh it, make sure it's all working. Let's go into inspect. Maybe we have something wrong here. Okay, it's all working. We see our video feed, and here we go. We see our offer. So we see an object, we see the offer. Here's our string. We see the type of offer, and there we go. So we just successfully created it. Now, I also want to set up my stun server, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use a free stun server from Google. So we'll set that up and then pass that into our peer connection. So locally, you actually don't need to set this up if we're just doing this in testing, but eventually, once you're actually using this project in a production environment, you'll need to actually set this up here. So let's just go ahead and do servers. We'll set up the servers, and I don't need equals right there. So we'll set up the servers, and this is simply going to be an object, and we're going to start with ice servers. Let's just do this slowly. So we'll do ice servers, and then this will be an array right here. And inside of this array, we're just going to go ahead and create an object here, and we're going to specify the URLs. And for this, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the actual Google Stun servers. So you can find a lot of different Stun servers. We're just going to go ahead and use these. So I'm going to copy this from some notes that I have here and paste this in. So the URLs here, we set up 2 of them right here, and there we go. So just copy that information and paste it exactly as is. So there's our servers, and we just need to go ahead and pass this into our RTC peer connection. Okay, so once we set up our stun servers, we still have some more work to do. So I'm going to create some space between our offer and this section right here. And I just want to get my local tracks and actually add them to the peer connection. So I have my local stream right here, and I just want to loop through all the audio and video tracks and actually add them to the connection so my remote peer can actually get them. So we'll just do local stream, and we're just going to go ahead and call get tracks here. So get tracks, and we're going to loop through every single track. So we're going to call for each here. Let's see, I did fro each, not fro, but for each. And let's just go ahead and loop through every single track. So we're getting all the tracks. We're going to use an arrow function here, and we're just going to go into peer connection dot add track. So that's a method that object gives us, and we're just going to add the track and then local stream. Okay, so on create offer, we're going to add our tracks to that peer connection, and the next thing I want to do is listen for when our peer actually adds their tracks too. So anytime the remote peer adds their tracks, we want to also add it to the peer connection and then listen for that event. So there's going to be an event listener here. We're going to call this peer connection, and then we'll do on track. So when our remote peer adds their tracks, we're going to go ahead and grab the event here. So we'll grab the event, set up the arrow function, and then here we're just going to go ahead and do event.streams, and then we're grabbing index 0. And then we're just going to go ahead and do get tracks again, calling the same thing. And we're just going to do dot for each. We're looping through every single track from our remote peer. And we're just going to go ahead and set that to the remote stream. Okay, so we're doing remote stream dot add track. Okay, so remember when we set up our remote stream right here and we passed that into the video container? Well, now we're actually adding the track. So any track we add will be added to this object right here, or to that video tag. So that's why we set it up, and then we actually add in the tracks. Okay, so we have another thing to do, and that is when we create an offer, we still need to create ICE candidates. So anytime we set the local description, by default, we have an event listener that can fire off here, and it's going to go ahead and actually start generating our ICE candidates. So at this point, we're just going to generate them and then console them out, and then we'll deal with signaling them over later here. So let's go ahead and also go into peer connection, and then we'll call .on ICE candidate. So that's the event listener. Every single time we create an ICE candidate, we're going to go ahead and create an async function, and we're going to take that event. And in here, we're first going to check if we actually have an ICE candidate. So event.candidate. So we want to make sure that the current event is a candidate here. And then once we get that candidate, let's just go ahead and console out, console.log. And then we'll just say new ICE candidate. And then here we'll just do event.candidate. Okay, so I can't spell candidate. Let's just copy that, bring that in here, and then there we go. Okay, so let's recap here. So we create an offer, then we set the local description. When we set the local description, it's going to trigger the ICE candidates to start. It's going to start making a series of requests to the Sun server, and it's going to create the ICE candidates. So set local description, we'll fire this off, and we'll just have a few candidates created. Now, we also we take our local stream, get all the tracks, and we add them to our remote peer. And then we also want to listen for anytime our remote peer adds tracks, and we're going to add them to that remote stream. So we're just kind of connecting a few things here. Okay, so let's save this again, and let's try this. Let's see the ICE candidates. So if I refresh this, here we're going to see an offer, and then we see new ICE candidate, new ICE candidate, and new ICE candidate. So there we go. We created the offer and the ICE candidate. So now we need to take this information and send it over to our remote peer to establish that initial connection. So we're going to take this offer right here along with each ICE candidate that we generate, and we're going to send that data over to that peer. Now, once that remote peer gets this information, they're going to create an SDP answer with their information, send it back to us. And once that exchange takes place, the two peers are now connected and data can begin flowing between the two peers. Now, this is usually done through a process called signaling, where essentially you would get some users in a room together and then use something like WebSockets to exchange this data in real time, so it all happens seamlessly in the background. Now, instead of building out our own signaling server and using WebSockets manually, what we're going to do is we're going to use a third-party service called Agora that gives us an SDK to make all this possible without having to actually build all this out on our own. Now, Agora is a paid service, but they do have a great free tier that's going to allow us to use a lot of their service before we actually cross that paid threshold. So let's go ahead and actually create an account on Agora. I want you to sign up, and we're just going to go ahead and create an app there, grab our app ID, and then make this connection happen. Now, with Agora, you also don't need a credit card on file, so that's one of the cool things. So you can actually sign up before you actually need a card for that paid tier. So go ahead and actually sign up, create your account, and once you create an account, you're going to see your Agora console here. And in here, what you're going to want to do is actually go into your project section, and you're going to want to create a new project. So go ahead and create a project here, specify the name. We'll just call this peer chat. And then for the use case, we're just going to specify social and then chat room. Now, for the authentication mechanism, we're going to select testing mode app ID. So this way we don't need a token. You'll need this in production, but for now, we just want to use the app ID. So I'm not going to create my app. Go ahead and submit this. I already have an app that I want to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab one of these. Now, to actually download the SDK, let's go back into our console, and we're going to go into downloads, and we're just going to grab the web platform. So there's different platforms that we can use this for. We're just going to go ahead and select web, and we're going to grab the real-time messaging SDK. So let's go ahead and click on this, open this up. This will download a zip file, and we're going to want to open up this folder right here. We'll go into libs, and we're just going to grab this one right here. So the .js extension. Now I'm just going to go ahead and minimize all of this, bring this into my desktop, close this out, and we're going to drag this into our peer chat folder. So once we have that in our folder, let's go ahead and actually make this connection. So we want to actually connect the SDK itself, and we're going to bring this down here. So we're going to copy main.js and then bring that just above the main.js file. So we're going to go ahead and click rename. I just want to get the name here, so make sure it's like that with that .js extension. Now, remember, you could build out your own signaling server. You don't need to use something like Agora. If you're just looking for the concept here, what I'd recommend to do here is just go ahead and actually do it this way. Use that free tier. And then if you want to try using your own signaling server, go ahead and do that. That's completely up to you. I just want to make sure it's easier for this video, and I don't limit this to anybody with a specific backend, because there's ways to do this with Python, with Node.js, and all these other platforms. This way we have one universal way to do it. Okay, so we have the Agora SDK. So that's all set up here. It's in our folder right here. So the file path is connected. And what I want to do next is actually go into our main.js file here, or main.js. And we're going to use our app ID from Agora. And I'm actually going to blur this out. So when this does go live, nobody can use my app ID. You want to make sure that this is actually hidden here. So let's go ahead and specify the app_ID. And then we'll add this in here. And that's also where, when you go into production, you're going to want to use token authentication. And I actually have more videos on my channel about how to do that. So let's go ahead and actually grab an app ID. So go back to your project here. So we'll go into projects, whatever you just created, and you're just going to click on the app ID here. So I click on it, it copies that immediately. We're going to go ahead and bring that in. We'll paste it in here, and that is now set up. Now the next thing we'll want to do here is set up our token value. And at this point, because we set up our authentication to use app ID only, we can actually set this as null, and we'll leave it there. But I do want to at least set the value so I can pass it in where I need. And then when you want to update this, you can actually change it directly here. So once we have our token, we also need a UID for each user. So every single user in our application, when you join a channel, this is how we identify who's who. So users can actually send messages to each other, and we know how many users we have in each channel. So how you do this is completely up to you. You can use some kind of ID from a database. You can use a UID generator. But in my case, what I'm going to do here is just generate a random number, and I'm going to make sure it's a big number so we have less of a chance of having some kind of duplicate. So we're just going to go ahead and call math.random, and we're just going to do this by 10,000. So we're going to generate some kind of random UID, and that's it for now. So I'll leave this up to you. But in this case, we also want to make sure that this is a string. So we're just going to go ahead and wrap that. So we'll do string math.floor, math.random, and that should give us our UID. So on each click, or anytime a user goes to this page, we're going to have a new UID generated. And then later on, we can talk about storing this UID inside of session storage or local storage. But for now, let's just leave it like this. So at this point, what we need to do is go ahead and create a client object. And this is going to be our client right here that we log in with, and the client that we have access to all these functions with. So it's actually a lot like this peer connection right here, where we establish that object, and this is going to give us access to everything that we need. So when we create our client, we're also going to need a channel. So this will be the channel that two users actually join. So we're going to create a channel and then join it, and this is what's going to allow us to send messages to this channel and no information about this specific channel. Okay, so we set up our app ID, our token, UID, client, and channel, and now it's time to actually start triggering this. So inside of our init function, let's go ahead and set this up right here. And the first thing we're going to create is going to be our client object. So we're going to call Agora RTM.create instance, and we can just throw in our app ID here. Now, the reason why we have access to all of these is because of the SDK that we added in here. And if you have any questions about all these methods that we're using, go ahead and go into your console and check out the Agora documentation. So we have the documentation right here and the API reference. Go ahead and just find web, and then real-time messaging right here, and any function that we use in this video, just go ahead and reference it right here if you need to know more about it. If you want to try something different, this will tell you everything that you need here. So we're later on going to use the send peer-to-peer message. You're going to see the login method that we're about to use, the create instant method that we just used, and so on. So go ahead and check this out. This will also be linked up in the video description. Okay, so let's go back into our project here. And once we create our client object, the next thing we need to do is actually log in. So we're going to call await, and then we'll do client.login. And to log in, we just need our UID and token. But at this point, because our authentication mechanism is set up to only app ID, we'll just throw in our token, which will be a null value, and that's it. So we create our client, we log in, then we need to go ahead and create the channel. So we're just going to do channel, and this will be client.create channel. So this is all coming from that client object right here. And to create a channel, we're just going to go ahead and give it a name. So this function will either find a channel by this name or it will create it. And later on, this will be some kind of dynamic value like room ID, something like that from the URL. And we're just going to go ahead and have that in our URL like this. So we'll just do something like index.html. if I can type a little slower, and then we'll just throw in the room ID, and that's going to be some kind of number like that. So for now, we're only going to have one channel. We're just going to call it main, but I'll leave this right here so you can actually reference this, and then we're going to update this. Okay, so we're creating our channel, and once we create a channel, we need to join this channel. So we're going to call await, and then we can just do channel.join. Okay, so that's it. We just created a channel, we joined, we logged in with our client, and we are set up to go. Now, what we need to do here is actually listen for whenever any other client actually joins the same channel. So another user, when they actually pull up the website, we need to know about them joining the channel, and then we need to send them a message. So with this, we actually have some event listeners that we can actually work with. So using this channel method right here, or this channel object, we can actually call channel.on. And there is an event listener in the documentation that you can find called member joined. So anytime somebody calls the join method on the other end, we can trigger this, and it's going to respond with a function that we're going to create, and this is going to be called handle user joined. So let's go ahead and test this out. So let's go ahead and create this function, and then we're going to check this in the console. So we'll go ahead and bring this down here, and we'll call handle user joined. We'll make this an async function, and by default, we will get that member UID. So we're getting that member's UID, then we'll go ahead and just continue here, and let's just console out a new user has joined. So console.log, a new user joined the channel. Okay, so with this, I also want to know their ID. So let's go ahead and throw this in, and there we go. So when a user calls a join method on the other end, we're going to respond with this function right here, and let's check this out. So if I open this up, let's go ahead and do inspect element. Let's see, let's open up the console, and I'm going to open this up in another tab. We'll make this smaller so we can actually see the console, and you're going to see this respond in real time. So we're going to see this console get triggered right here. So we'll go ahead and join, and there we go. So we see a new user has joined the channel, and we see this user's ID. It's 2535. So the user just joined the channel, and it triggered this function for us. Now, when a user joins, what's the first thing that we want to do? Well, inside of our application, what we need to do is we need to send this user a message from peer 1. So we have peer 1 and peer 2. So we need to send a message over with our original offer. So right now, let's just work on sending that message over. So once a user joins, we want to go ahead and actually create the offer. So let's take this create offer method, and let's move this down into the handle user joined. So we'll go ahead and paste that in here, and what I want to do here is actually send out a message from the create offer function. So what I'll do is take this member ID, we'll pass that in as a parameter here, and inside of the create offer function, we'll bring that down here, and let's go ahead and actually send out the message. Now, at this point, we deal with all the logic here with creating our peer connection, we create an offer, and we want to go ahead and actually send out the offer once it's created. So we'll remove this right here, and we can actually access the client object. So we'll do client.send message to peer. So this is a function that we have here, and we're going to go ahead and send the actual message. So this will be the text value, and then we can just say something like, hey. So we'll just throw that in like that, and then we need to know what peer to send this to. So to actually send it to a peer, we're just going to go ahead and get this member ID, and that's how we know who to direct message here. So we'll go ahead and add that in, and this will send a message to a peer with this ID. Now on the other end, we need to respond to this message. So we need a way to listen for that event and then actually process that specific message. So let's go ahead and access our client object inside of the init function, and the event listener that we want to handle is going to be message from peer. So anytime somebody calls the send message function specifically to us, so our client object, we're going to go ahead and respond here, and the function I'm going to create here is going to be called handle message from peer. And let's go ahead and actually create the function. So we want to process the actual message. So let's go ahead and create that handle message from peer. We'll make that an async function. And in here, we're just going to get the actual message, and we're going to get the member ID. So we want to know who sent this message. So let's go ahead and finish up the arrow function. And at this point, I just want to console it out. So we're going to get that message value, and specifically we need to get the message.text value. So message.text, and that's going to be this part right here. So let's go ahead and test this out. We'll open up two browsers side by side. Once we have this set up here, we'll actually be able to start sending the offers and answers. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this out. So if I join with another peer, so if I refresh this, we're going to get an alert that tells us a peer has joined, and then peer 2 should get a message from this user. So right now, if I open this up, we should see this alert. We see a new peer has joined the channel. And then on this peer's end, we should have received a message. So let's check this out. And here we go. We see the message of, hey, and it looks like everything's working. So awesome. So let's actually go ahead and send an offer instead of just a message like that. So we do need to send a string here. So let's go ahead and actually call json.stringify. So we'll stringify an actual object, and this will be the message that we send, and then we'll parse it on the other end. So at this point, I want to send some more information with the message. So I want to send a type. So later on, when we're sending offers and answers and ICE candidates, I want to know the type of message that I'm receiving. So this type will be of an offer, and then we send the actual offer, and that is going to be this offer right here. So we're just going to go ahead and send this offer to our peer. Now, on the other end, let's go ahead and actually get this offer. So we'll just go into handle message from peer, and I'm just going to get that message value, and we're just going to do json.parse, and we're just going to parse the actual message here. So let's just go ahead and grab this, bring this into here, and then change this to just message because we already parsed the text value. And let's just try this one more time. So I'm going to need to refresh a few things. And let's see. So at this point, this is peer 2 now because I just refreshed this. Here we have a message, type of offer, and then the actual offer, and we sent that out to the peer. Now with the offer, I also want to send the ICE candidates as they get generated. So this is going to be that trickle ICE method. So let's take this entire method right here. Let's copy that, and let's bring this in right here. So let's just paste this over this console.log right here. And at this point, we're going to send a message of candidate, and then the actual message itself. So the type will be candidate. We're going to change that to candidate. And then the type of, or the actual message will be event.candidate. So let's check this out. Okay, so type is candidate, and then we send over the ICE candidates. All right, so let's try that one more time. Let's refresh this, and then we'll refresh this. So this will be peer 2. So here we have an offer. Then we have the actual candidate. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So each candidate was trickled in one by one. So there we go. That looks good. Awesome. Okay, so there's one more thing that I want to fix up before we move on to the next section. So we're about to start creating an answer. And at this point, ever since we removed the create offer function from init to handle user joined, for some reason, the local stream doesn't get created right away if I refresh the page too fast. So essentially, we're calling local stream.getTracks, and every once in a while when the page refreshes, this is basically a null value, and then we can't get the tracks, and then it throws some kind of error. So let's go ahead and actually fix this. So what I'm going to do here is just underneath our remote stream, we're just going to ask a quick question, and we're going to say if not local stream, so we're using the not operator. If we don't have it on create offer, let's just quickly create the local stream and append it to the DOM. So if we happen to not have it, it's kind of like an extra check here. I'm sure there's different ways to do this, but that should be a quick fix. Okay, so that's it for the create offer function, and let's go ahead and start creating the answer. So just below our create offer function, let's go ahead and create a new function, and we're going to call this one create answer. So we'll call this create answer, and at this point we'll make this an async function, and we also want to pass in the member ID here. So we have this function, and a lot of the logic inside of the create offer or create answer function is going to be very similar to the create offer function. So in the create answer function on peer 2 side, we still need to create that peer connection. We still need to set up that remote stream, which will be user 2 for peer 2. So technically on the receiving end, the user that sent the offer will be user 2 and so on. So it kind of flips it. And they still need to go ahead and create all these local tracks, the ICE candidates, and the peer, or not the ICE candidates, but the basically set up the local and remote tracks and then send out ICE candidates. Now this is the part that's going to be a little bit different for create answer. So let's take everything that's going to be repeated in both of these functions and let's put that into its own function and have that fire off before we start repeating all of our code here. So let's go ahead and go above create offer, and you'll see what I'm doing here in a second if it doesn't make sense. So let's go ahead and create a function called create. So create peer connection. Okay. So we'll go ahead and make this an async function, and inside of peer connection, we still need a member ID. So we're basically just going to keep passing this down, and we'll create the function, finish this up here. And inside of create peer connection, let's go ahead and take this peer connection from create offer all the way down to on ICE candidates. So we'll copy this. Let's remove that. We'll clean up the function here. Let's bring that into create peer connection. So now we can take all this logic inside of create peer connection, and we can move this down into create offer. So let's just go ahead and call await, create peer connection, and pass in the member ID. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take all that logic that was repeated, bring that in here, and now inside of create offer or create answer, I can do the same right here. So we create that peer connection, and there we go. So we just cleaned up a bunch of code just to make sure you can recap this. We took everything from peer connection down to on ICE candidates. So both users will have to do the same thing. Okay, so now inside of create answer, let's go ahead and continue here and actually process this. So in create answer, we're going to get the member ID, and we're also going to get the offer from our user. So let's go ahead and get that offer. And when we call this function, you'll see where this actually comes from. So we're getting an offer on create answer when a user sends this over. And what we need to do with this offer is go ahead and set this as a remote description. So every single peer will have a local description and they will have a remote description. So each peer connection has 2 descriptions. So let's go ahead and call this. So we'll do peer connection dot set remote description. And we're just going to go ahead and pass in the offer. So the offer for peer 2 will be that, or the remote description for peer 2 will be the offer. Now peer 2 also needs to create an answer to send back to peer 1. So we'll go ahead and create an answer, and the answer will be await, and we're just going to go ahead and call peer connection dot create answer. So earlier we called create offer, and for peer 2 or the remote peer, we're calling create answer. I guess I shouldn't call this peer 2, I should just say the receiving peer. So basically the second peer that joined. Okay, so we create an answer, and now we need to set our local description for that second peer. So we're going to go ahead and call peer connection dot set local description. So remember, we called this for peer 1 on create offer. We took that local description and set that as the offer, but in peer 2's case, we're going to go ahead and throw in the answer. So for peer 2, the remote description is the offer and the local description is the answer. All right, so once the second peer creates the answer, what do they need to do? Well, they need to send back their SDP answer. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to take this entire method right here, and we're just going to send this back to peer 1, or the first peer. Okay, so we're calling client.sendMessage to peer, and the type will be of answer, and then we're going to take the actual answer. Let's copy that, and we'll send the answer to peer 1. We have the member ID because we passed that in here. Okay, so now we actually want to call create answer. So let's go into our handle message from peer function, and this is where we need to process everything. So we'll minimize all this. So we'll minimize the create offer and create answer. And then inside of handle message from peer, let's go ahead and ask a few questions. So the first question we're going to ask is going to be the type of message. So we're going to say if message.type, remember we're sending that entire object, so we actually have this type value. So if the message is an offer, let's go ahead and actually create an answer. So we're going to go ahead and grab this function right here. So we pass in the member ID and the offer into it. So if we received an offer, let's go ahead and paste this in. So we'll go ahead and throw in the member ID. So we need to know who to send this message back to. So we'll just go ahead and do message.offer. Okay, so that's the member ID and that's the offer, and that's where we get it. So this offer will be set as a local description. Now we want to ask this question one more time, and what I want to do here is also process the answer. So when this peer creates the answer and sends the answer back, we need to also process this from handle message from peer. So let's copy all of this right here, and we're going to say if the message type is of an answer, let's go ahead and actually add the answer. So we're going to create this function right now. So we'll call this add answer, and let's go ahead and actually process it. So in add answer, we're just going to do message.answer. We're going to get this back from a peer, and we don't need the member ID anymore because we're not sending a message back. So that's going to complete that transaction. So let's go ahead and actually add the answer. So we'll go down here just below create answer. So this will be that first peer, the peer that initiated the offer. They're going to get back the answer, and then they need to process this. So we'll go ahead and call add answer, and we'll make sure that this is an async function. And let's go ahead and grab the answer. We'll complete the function, and all we need to do here is go ahead and set the answer. So we're first going to check if we have a current remote description. So we'll use a not operator. So if peer connection dot current remote description, so this is actually how we can get it. So if peer connection dot current remote description, just want to type that slowly. So if we currently don't have a remote description, let's go ahead and set it. So we'll just do peer connection dot set remote description, and we're just going to throw in the answer. So I just want to recap this real quick. So remember peer 1 sends out the offer. So let's see, we create everything. Oh, that's peer connection. Let's go into create offer. So peer 1 sets their local description and sends out the offer. And then peer 2, when they get that offer, sets their remote description and their local description. But the last thing in this process is peer 1 still needs to set their remote description, which is going to be that answer. Okay, so peer 1, or the first peer, is going to go ahead and set that remote description, and that almost completes the process, but we still want to do one more thing. We still want to set the ICE candidates. So let's take this right here, and let's copy and paste it, and we're going to say if the message type is of candidate, so remember inside of create peer connection, both peers will send out these candidates as the candidates get trickled in. So let's go ahead and go up here. So if the message type is of candidate, what do we want to do here? So we're just going to go ahead and check if we have a peer connection. So let's just double check this. So we'll say if we currently have a good peer connection, let's go ahead and call peer connection dot add ICE candidate. So this is actually how we add a candidate to our peer connection. So we're just going to call message dot candidate. So we sent out the candidate right here. So we're just calling message dot candidate. All right, so let's just recap a few things. Let's make sure everything's going good. Let's see, let's go back up here. So we get the offer, we create the answer. When we get the answer, we add the answer. And then when we get a candidate, we go ahead and set that candidate. Now, there's one other thing that I noticed here. So inside of our create peer connection function, I actually forgot to add in a track on peer connection on track. So let's take this track and to the remote stream, let's throw that in. And at this point, everything should be working well. So we're going to open up our 2 tabs and we're going to see that peer connection take place. Let's hope everything went well. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So we'll open up our browsers and we're going to need to refresh everything here. So I'm sure we're going to have some kind of errors at first. So let's just refresh everything. And it looks like it's already working. Awesome. So here we go. We'll close this out. So you notice how peer 2, I guess it's on this side, I'm frozen right there. That's because I left, and we're going to deal with that leave functionality in a second. But at this point, if I refresh this, we're only going to see peer 1. So that looks good. Now, when another peer joins, we're going to see peer 2 join, and then on that other peer side, we're going to see peer 2 or peer 1. So essentially, we just successfully exchanged the offer, the answer, the ICE candidates, and everything's working well. So if that part didn't fully make sense, go through that slowly and just kind of try to understand everything and watch the beginning of the video where I talk about that exchange process. But we just finished that up and everything is working well. So let's go ahead and actually deal with this, because right now if I make a funny face, I'll just do this. And there we go. So I'm frozen. Awesome. So that's what I wanted to do. So we want to fix that. Okay, so let's go back in here. And the first thing I want to do here is actually go into my CSS file, and I want to make sure user 1 is hidden until user 2 is hidden until we join. So we're going to go ahead and grab this second video container or the video tag, and we're going to hide it and then display it only when a peer joins. So we're just going to go ahead and do user 2, not video, but user -2, and we're just going to do display, and we're going to set that to none. Okay, so user 2 is going to be hidden, and now we can go back into our code or into our website, and there we go. We see user 2 is hidden. Now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and actually display that user as a block element once they actually join the stream. So we want this for the local and remote users, so both peers want to trigger this. So let's go ahead and go into create peer connection, and we're just going to copy this right here, and we're going to paste this just below, and we're going to call user2.style.display, and we're going to display this as a block element. So when they join, we're just going to go ahead and display that as a block element, or when they're about to join, and that'll go ahead and get that taken care of. Now, the next thing I want to deal with is when a user leaves. So anytime they leave, I want to go ahead and hide that again. And there is another event we can listen for with this channel. So we're going to call channel.on, and we can listen for member left. So that's the event. And then we'll add in the function, and that's going to be handle user left. Okay, so let's create the actual function. We'll bring this down here, and we'll just create this called handle user left. And this is going to actually take in the member ID. We don't need it here, but I figured I want to show you how to pass that in if you want to actually maybe remove a specific DOM element. So we'll pass in that ID, and then you can use this later if you need it. So at this point, all we need to do is go ahead and grab that user2 value. So we'll do document.get element by ID, and we're just going to go ahead and grab user-2.style.display, and this is going to be set to null, or actually we'll just do none. Okay, so on user leave, we're gonna go ahead and hide it, but we still have a few things we need to take care of. So at this point, when a user tries to leave here, we're actually not leaving with that user from the channel. So we can close out the browser, but by default, if Agora sees any activity after about 20 or 30 seconds, then that user left will be triggered. So we want to actually trigger this whenever the user actually leaves, so it happens right away. So let's go down here and let's actually log a user out and leave the channel. So we're going to create another function called leave channel, and we're just going to go ahead and make this an async function again. And at this point, let's go ahead and call the two functions. So the first thing we want to do is create or call await channel.leave. So we want to leave the channel, and then we want to log out as a user. So we're just going to go ahead and call client.logout. Okay, so leave channel should be called anytime a user leaves. Now, one thing we could do is we could just go ahead and actually trigger this anytime a user clicks a leave button, but we all know users don't actually work that way. They usually just close their laptop or click X up here, and we want to account for that. So at this point, let's just go ahead and call leave channel on window. So we'll add an event listener to the actual window, and we can add an event listener called before unload. So basically before the website actually closes, we can call before unload, and anytime a user closes this out, we're just going to call leave channel. So that will ensure that a user leaves or actually leaves a channel whenever their window just closes out. Now at this point, I'm going to need to wait a little bit because we've technically joined with a new user every single time that channel's refreshed. So go ahead and give this about maybe 30 to 40 seconds. Let every single user leave the channel if you've been refreshing it, and then we'll just test this out from scratch, because what's going to happen is if a user joins right now and then we actually try to join with another user, it's going to toggle that handle user left function anytime another user leaves. And if we have two users in there but a third user leaves, it's going to remove that DOM element. So I think that might have been about 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and just check this out. Let's see. So we're seeing this handle or this member left function being called. So it looks like it completed all of those. And let's go ahead and just try this out. So we'll open this up in another tab. So we see two users, perfect. And now when we leave, so let's just close this out. There we go, it removes it, and that looks good. So let's try this one more time. Let's give this a test. There we go, it looks good. Awesome. Okay, sweet. Yeah, we just needed to do that delay because by default, again, if we don't call the function, in fact, let me just show you because I guess while we're here, I want it to make sense here. So let's remove that and let's not actually call the leave channel function. So let's open this up here and let's join with a user, and then let's really quickly leave with this user and join with another. So at this point, we see two peers in the chat and they're connected. They should be able to communicate. But the problem here is about after 30 seconds, because I left with that original user, they are going to leave the channel by default after that time, and it's just going to remove this window. So that's why we need to call it manually, because then Agora will just respond on its own. So I might just fast forward here, give it some time. There we go. It just triggered it. And we're supposed to be still in our conversation, but because that other user that just left the channel officially, now that element was removed for the DOM. So yeah, that was kind of our issue. So now if I actually go ahead and remove this or comment this out or take out that comment, now the user will be removed whenever we tell them to. So the next thing I want to do here is go ahead and start creating dynamic rooms. So up until now, we only have one room name, and that's main. And I told you earlier that we were going to go ahead and append a room name to the URL so we can actually create multiple rooms and have people join those rooms. So how we're going to do this is we're going to create another page, and this will be a lobby. And essentially we're going to have a form where we can enter a room ID, share that room ID with somebody, and then they can go ahead and enter that same name and join this specific channel. So let's go ahead and create a new template here, and we're going to call this lobby.html. And inside of this page, let's go ahead and set up our boilerplate code here. So we're just going to start typing in HTML. We'll set this up. I'll go ahead and set the title here. And in here, inside of the body, I'm just going to go ahead and actually remove that script tag. And we're going to change this to lobby.css because we're going to add in our own CSS in a bit. So let's actually add that right now so it doesn't throw any errors. So we're going to call this lobby.css. Okay, so inside of lobby.html, let's go ahead and build out our form. So we're going to go ahead and create some tags here. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and do form, give it an ID, and the name is going to be join-form. So with this form, let's go ahead and add in some input fields. So we'll do input, And for this value, this will be a type of text here. So that's going to be the actual invite code. And for the name, I'm just going to call it invite link. So we'll do invite underscore link, and you can call this whatever you want. I just made it like that when I built out the demo, so we're going to leave it like that. And I'm going to make sure that this field is required. So you can't join a room without an invite link. So you have to enter that. So the next input value, this is going to be the actual submit form. So we're going to go ahead and set the type to submit. So type is going to be equal to submit, and then the value. So we want to actually have some text here. We're just going to say join room, and that's going to be it. Okay, let's create some space here. So let's go ahead and check out the page, make sure that we have this set up here. So we're just going to do lobby, and we'll close out the second one. So here's our join form, and we are ready to add in some functionality here. So we're going to throw in our invite code here, or let's say we have a room name like learn code or something like that. Whatever we want, it's up to us. We're just going to throw in some kind of values in here. So let's go ahead and move to this part here, and we're just going to go ahead and add in our JavaScript code directly in line. So we're just going to go ahead and create the script tag. And in here, the first thing I want to do is go ahead and get my form. So the form is going to be document.get element by ID. And we're just going to get the join form. So we'll get that join form. Once we have that, let's go ahead and add an event listener to it. So we'll do form.add event listener. And specifically, we want to listen for the submit event. And we're going to create the function in line here. So we're just going to go ahead and create the arrow function. And when we submit this form, the first thing I want to do is actually just go ahead and prevent that default action. So I don't want the form submitting anything. I want to actually take care of what happens next. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and grab the invite code. So we'll set a variable. So we'll do invite code. And this is going to be e.target. So we're going into the form. And we're just going to grab the value of invite link. So invite underscore link. So we're going to grab that invite link right there, and we're going to set that to invite code. And then we just want to redirect our user to the next page. So we're going to do window.location. And this is going to be with the backticks. We're going to do index.html. And then we're just going to throw in the room ID. So we'll do room is equal to, and then we'll throw in the invite code. Okay, so when you're actually creating this invite code, try making sure that it's only one word. You could just go ahead and actually parse it, make sure there's no spaces in there, because that could throw issues. I'm not going to focus on that in this video, but I would highly recommend forcing users to make this one word, because if there's spaces when we're actually creating that room ID, that might be an issue. Okay, so we have the form, and when we submit it, it should go ahead and redirect a user to the index page with the invite code. So we still have some more work to do, but let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll just test this by adding in some kind of ID. We'll do 1, 2, 3. We'll do join room, and it looks like we have an error. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. So for some reason, the invite code is not actually working. So we did e.target. Oh, we need the value. So there we go. I thought that looked weird because we actually got the object. Okay, so we'll refresh that. We'll do 1, 2, 3, join, and there we go. So we have index.html and the room of 1, 2, 3. So to actually make this room, we need to go ahead and get this value from the URL. So back in index.html, or main.js actually, let's go ahead and open this up. And at the top of the page, let's go ahead and actually get that URL. So just underneath our UID, actually we'll bring this right here. Let's go ahead and parse the URL and get the values. So the first thing I want is the actual URL parameters. So we'll go ahead and set up the query string here. And this is going to be window.location.search. And then once we set this up, we're going to go ahead and get the URL parameters. So we'll do URL params. And this is going to be new URL search params. And we're just going to throw in query string in here. Okay, so we're going to get all that. And then we're going to go ahead and get the room ID. So we're going to do let room ID. So we'll set this variable up, and this will be URL params, and we'll just call get and then throw in the actual room value. So once we get that room ID, I just want to make sure that a user does have a room ID before they actually go to a specific room. So we're going to use a not operator, and we're going to say if there is currently not a room ID. So let's say that a user tries to go to this page, they just try to go to index.html or whatever we call that page. We just want to redirect them back to the login page whenever they don't have a value in here. So we'll do window.location, and we'll just do lobby.html. Okay, so we have our room ID, and let's go ahead and bring this in here. So on channel, we're no longer going to join the main channel. We're just going to go ahead and throw in that room ID. So that's going to replicate this right here. So let's go ahead and just remove that now. So let's go ahead and open up our page and check this out. So at this point, let's just go into index.html, and this should redirect us. So if I click this, it redirects us back to lobby, so we cannot join index.html without some kind of room ID. So let's go ahead and add in 1, 2, 3. We'll join, and here we go. We see ourselves here. So let's go ahead and open up another tab here, and let's go ahead and send the user to the lobby page. So we'll just do lobby.html, and let's say this user right here wants to invite user number 2. We'll give them this invite code. We'll just do 1, 2, 3, and then when they join, there we go, we're in the same room. Now if this user leaves back to the lobby, and let's say they join with 1, 2, 3, 4, they're going to join a room, but they're going to be in their own room because that room name actually changed. So perfect, everything's looking good. This is exactly what we wanted here. And at this point, what I'm ready to do before we actually start styling this is I'm ready to add in some controls. So we're going to add in some controls here to toggle our mic, toggle our camera, and actually leave our room, and then we'll actually start making this application look pretty awesome. So a lot of good work so far. If you got this far, you should be proud of yourself. Let's go ahead and move on to the fun stuff of actually making this thing functional and look good. So we'll go back into index.html here, and in here what I want to do is go ahead and create a container for my controls. So we'll add this just below our videos. We'll go ahead and create a div here, and I'm just going to go ahead and give this the ID of controls. So we'll do controls here, and then let's go ahead and actually add in some controls. So we'll create some space here, and each control item is going to be wrapped inside of a div. So we'll create a div, and I'm going to give this a class of control-container. So we have our control container, and this specific item right here will be the camera button. So we'll do camera-btn, and I'm actually going to give you some images to work with. If you want to use your own icons, you can go ahead and throw those in, but I want to give you some specific images to use here. So we have our control container and our camera button, and let's go ahead and add in the image, and then we'll drag it in here. So we'll go ahead and do image, close this out, and then we'll set up the source here. Now for the images, I'm going to go ahead and refer you to the GitHub repo if you want to use the same exact icons that I'm using. So I'll go ahead and drag this into Frame, and this is going to be linked up in the video description, so go ahead and download this entire repo. So at this point, I just want to walk you through this just to kind of make sure you see all the steps here, and let's just go ahead and bring this into our desktop. So we have the folder. We'll go ahead and open up the zip folder, grab the icons folder and drag that out here, and then let's close this up here. So we'll close the repo, again, find that in the video description, and then drag this into your peer chat folder. Okay, so now we have the icons here, and here we have a camera, invite, a mic, and a phone icon. So we'll just have a few of them in there, and we're just going to use the ones that we need right now. So at this point, let's go ahead and actually set up the images here. So we'll go into the icons folder, and the first one I want to grab is going to be camera.png. So these are all in here. So we see camera.png, and once I have that, I just want to go ahead and duplicate this 2 times and set up the other icons here. So this one's going to be a mic button, and we're going to do mic.png. And then for the leave button, we're going to go ahead and change the ID to leave. So leave btn. And then this is just going to be a phone. So it's going to be like we're hanging up the phone, and there we go, we have our icons. So these still won't be visible because the icons are white and our background is currently white. So let's go ahead and actually create some styling. So we have this container here for the actual buttons here and this wrapper. So let's go ahead and style these up. So we'll go into not lobby.css but main.css here, and let's go ahead and actually style the controls. So the first thing I want to do is actually get the buttons here. So we'll do control-container, and for this, let's go ahead and give this a background color. So we'll do background color, and I actually have an RGB color that I want to use here. So we'll just do RGB, and I'll just add in these values. So 179, and then we'll do 102, and then we'll set some opacity here. So 249, and then the opacity of 0.9 here. So I just want to make sure that you can sort of see through them because we are going to be placing the icons over the video frame. Okay, so we have a background color. Let's go ahead and add in some padding. So for the padding, we'll just do 20 pixels all around. Set that up here, and then we'll just make sure there's circles. So we'll do border radius 50%. And then after that, we also want to make sure that the button is centered, or the actual icon image is centered and set inside of this container. So we'll just do display flex here. So display flex, and then we'll just do justify content, and that's going to be centered, and then we'll do align items centered. So we want to make sure it's centered horizontally and vertically. Okay, so we're going to center that, and we also want to make sure the buttons look clickable. So we'll do cursor, pointer, and then we want to style the actual images inside of this container. So let's go ahead and take the control container, and we'll just take the image tag, and we'll give it a height and width of 30 pixels. So 30 pixels, and then width is going to be 30 pixels. And then for the leave button, I want to make sure that this is red. So we're just going to go ahead and give this a different background color. So leave button, we're just going to do background color, and this is going to be an RGB color. So RGB, and the value here is going to be 255, and then we'll do 80, 80, and then we're just going to set that to 0.9. Actually, for this, let's just not give it any opacity. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is style the actual container. So inside of our page here, index.html, we're going to style the controls wrapper. So we just want to make sure we position this at the bottom of the page, and we want to make sure that it's centered. So let's go ahead and get that container. So we'll do controls, and we're going to do position fixed here. So fixed position, so this way we can place it anywhere in the page. And we want to make sure this is at the bottom, but not exactly touching the bottom. So we'll just set that at 20 pixels, and then we want to center this. So we'll do left 50%, and then we can do transform, and this will be transform X right there, and then we can do negative 50%. So that's going to go ahead and center that, and then we want to inline all the items. So we'll do display flex, and we can just do column of 1 EM. We just want to make sure that, or not column, but we want to add in a gap, so some spacing between each item, and we'll just do 1 EM. All right, so let's go ahead and check this out now. Let's see what we have. Let's join the page. We'll just join the room of 1, and there we go. So we have our control buttons, and everything looks good. So let's go ahead and actually link this button right here up to the page. So we'll go ahead and actually make this a link. So we'll just wrap it. So just above the div here, let's go ahead and create a href here, and we'll just point this to lobby.html. So on the leave button, all the user is going to do is just go back to the lobby. So just go ahead and wrap this entire item, fix the indentation, and we should be good to go. Okay, so if I click this, there we go, we can leave. If I go ahead and add in a room name, we're here, and that should be good to go. Okay, so let's add in the functionality to these buttons. So right now, if I'm clicking it, nothing actually happens. So let's go ahead and create some functions here and toggle a few things. So let's go back into our main.js file, and at the bottom of the page, just before or just after leave channel, let's go ahead and create this function. So the first thing we want to do is toggle the camera. So we're going to call this toggle camera, and we'll make this an async function. And in here, what we need to do is first find the video track. So the actual camera, we're just going to go ahead and set this to video track, and we're going to look inside of local streams, and we're just going to search all the tracks. So we're going to call get tracks, and we are specifically looking for a track that has the value of video. So we're going to call find, and in here we're just going to loop through, look for the track, and specifically we're going to check if the track.kind value is equal to video. Okay, so let me just go ahead and close this out. So we're getting the video track, we're going into local streams, we're finding the track of video, and once we have that, we just want to check if this video track is enabled or not, and then we want to switch what we're going to do with it. So we're going to go ahead and check the video track, and we're going to call enabled. So enabled. Okay, so we're checking enabled. If the video track is currently enabled, what we want to do is go ahead and turn it off. So we're going to call video track.enabled, and we're going to set this to false. That means we're disabling the track, and the camera is going to be turned off temporarily, or it's going to be muted. So once we do that, we're just going to go ahead and change the color of the actual button. So we're going to get the actual button value, and this is going to be camera-btn. So camera button. And we're just going to do .style. Let's see, we're getting background color, and we're going to set this to RGB, and the actual value is going to be 255, and we're getting 80 and then 80. So that should go ahead and set that to red. So if the camera track is currently not enabled, that means it's currently muted. Then what we want to do is just go ahead and turn it back on. So we're going to get these two values right here, paste this in. We're going to set the camera enabled to true, and then we're just going to change this color right here, and we're going to do 179, and then we can do 102 and 249, and then we can actually do the 0.9 opacity. Okay, so that should toggle the camera, and we're simply toggling the actual video track and changing the color. So once we do that, let's go ahead and add in the event listener. So we're going to get the camera button. We'll add an event handler to it. So we'll bring this down here, .add event listener, and we're gonna listen for a click event, and we're gonna call toggle camera. Okay, so that's all we need to do. Let's go ahead and test this out. We'll open this up. Let's go ahead and click the camera button, turns it off, turns it back on, and it looks like we're good to go. Okay, so at this point, we need to go ahead and toggle the actual mic. So before we do that, we're gonna go ahead and go up here, and we're gonna set audio to true because we have not gotten the audio yet. So that was because I didn't want the echo to occur. So at this point, I'm just gonna be able to mute it once it starts happening. But once we set that to true, we're just gonna go ahead and copy this toggle camera function and paste that down here and simply update a few values here. So we're gonna call this toggle mic now, and we need to update this to audio track. So we'll do audio track, and then the type of track that we're looking for is gonna be audio. And let's go ahead and just update this. So audio track enabled. We're gonna update the actual audio track here, update this part right here. And let's see, we actually wanna change this to mic button. So mic button and then mic button. Okay, so we're doing the same exact thing. We're simply checking if it's enabled. If it is, we turn it off. If it's not, we turn it back on, and we style the button. Okay, so now that we have this toggle mic function, let's just go ahead and copy this, paste it, and change this to mic button, and then we're gonna toggle the mic function here, or call the toggle mic function. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna hear some kind of echo, and I might have some issues because we only allowed the video feed. So if you're seeing this right here, this is probably because we need to reset some settings here, because originally we denied permission for audio, but we need to go ahead and just reset this. So let's go ahead and check this out. We'll go into privacy and security, go into site settings, and at this point, let's just reset everything here. So we'll go into camera, we'll reset all of this, and then we'll go back here, site settings, and then we'll go into mic. So we denied it earlier, so now it's confused on why we're having access to it if we already denied it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and refresh this, and now it's gonna ask me for the camera and microphone tracks before it only asked me for the camera, and I'm gonna get my headphones in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and allow all. And there we go. Okay, so I hear the echo. It's really loud, it's throwing me off, but now I can actually toggle the camera, toggle the mic on and off, and both users can do this. So let's go ahead and try this out. So let's mute it here. So if user 1 turns off their camera, user 2 is also gonna see that user's camera turned off. So if I turn this back on, it's gonna turn it on both sides. And that's it for the control functionality. So we're almost done here. We are ready to style up the page. So what I'm gonna do here is go ahead and just add in styling to the lobby page and this page. We're gonna go through this pretty quick, and then we'll move on to setting the video quality. So when the screen actually gets big, you're gonna notice the dimensions of the video itself are gonna be a little bit messed up. They're not gonna be messed up exactly, but the quality of the video is gonna be not the best. So we just wanna reset that. So that's the last stuff that we have to do. So let's go ahead and finish this up. And I'm gonna go ahead and close this part out here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into our main.css file, and let's start changing things up. So the first thing I want to do here is go ahead and start resetting the global settings here. So we'll just go ahead and set this for everything, and we're going to set margin to 0. So basically margin on every single item in our page is going to be 0, and then padding is also going to be 0. And then we want to go ahead and set box-sizing to border box. So just so we actually fit the parameters of any item that we have, so the padding isn't extended outside of the parent element. I don't know why I'm teaching CSS here, but yeah. Okay, so for the videos, we'll display this as grid. We only want one frame here, so we no longer want 2 frames because of the style that we're going for. We don't need a gap anymore, and we're just gonna set the height to 100 viewport height. So let's go ahead and just see what we have here. So let's also set overflow to hidden. So overflow, just add hidden here. Okay, and let's check this out. So let's just see what we have so far. So at this point, we just adjusted a few things. So let's see, display grid, height is 100%. And let's just set the height of the actual video player to 100%. So that's why I didn't fill it all the way out. Okay, so this is more of what I wanted, and let me just reset my camera here so it's more pointed at me now. So this is the height and width that we currently have. We just took up the entire frame. So let's go ahead and just complete the styling. So for the video player, let's also do object fit, and we'll do cover. So I make sure that we cover the entire item. So we'll just set that up. And then for user 2, let's see, we're going to leave this as is, but we want to go ahead and style the remote user. So the remote user will take up the big screen. So as we're talking to someone, we want to see them in frame, but we want to make sure that our video frame is here in the top left right here. So let's go ahead and actually add in a new class that we're going to append to our user. So we're going to create a class called small frame here. So we'll go ahead and set this up. The position is going to be fixed because we need to position this anywhere we need to position it wherever we want on the page. So that will allow us to do this. For the top here, we're going to do 20 pixels from the top, and then we're going to do left at 20 pixels. Okay, so for the height, let's just go ahead and set this to 170 pixels. And for the width, let's set this to 300 pixels. So we want to make it sort of like a rectangle here. And then we want to give it some round borders here. So we'll just do border radius of 5 pixels. And let's see, for the border itself, I want to make sure that it's a purple border with 2 pixels. Make sure that it's solid. And we need to add px right there. And then for the hex value, we'll just do B3. And then we'll do 66F9. Now, I also want to make sure that we have some shadow here. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy some values here and just paste them in. So we added a box shadow and then a Z index just to make sure we're at the top of the page, that this element is always towards the front so it's not hidden somewhere. So to actually adjust our video frame and add this class, let's go back into main.js here. And on pure connection, we're going to go ahead and actually add this class to our video frame. So let's go ahead and grab our current user right here. So now we're going to get user 1. We're going to copy and paste this right here. Let's create some space. We'll change this to user 1. So that's us. And we're just going to go ahead and add in a class. So we're going to do class list.add. And we're just going to go ahead and add the class of small frame. So that'll change our frame. And then after this, we also need to make sure that we remove it anytime a user leaves. So on handle user left, wherever that's at, let's go ahead and actually update this somewhere here. Handle user left. We're going to go ahead and grab that same element. And at this point, we're going to remove that class. So essentially when a user joins, we'll add in all this styling to our video frame. When they leave, we'll take it out. Okay, so let's save all of that. Let's make sure we can refresh this and let's check this out. Okay, so I'm in here alone. I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic and we're just going to go ahead and add in a new user. And there we go. So look at that. So when this user joined, this video frame went up here. So that's us right here at the top in this section, and this is that remote user. So if I leave, now we're in that big frame. So this is us right here, and the remote user is no longer here. So if I add this again, let's go ahead and just watch this update. So our video frame that's currently in here will jump to the top left. So we'll go ahead and add that. And there we go. So that's exactly what we're looking for. I think that looks pretty dang cool. And it kind of represents more of something that you would see on a phone or something like that. So speaking of phones, let's go ahead and fix that. And I know the quality is kind of bad here, so we're going to adjust a few things in a minute. So let's go ahead and make this actually responsive. So right now, if I start bringing this down, I don't want my face covered up here. In fact, I can just do inspect here, and let's just bring this over. So when this video frame actually gets small, I want to make sure that we can adjust for that. So let's go ahead and add in some styling and some media queries. So we'll go into our main.css, go down below the leave button, and we'll just do at media screen, and we are going to do and 600 pixels. So max width 600 pixels. So basically when we get to 600 pixels, that's when we want things to adjust. And we're just going to go ahead and get the small frame, and we're going to set a height of 80 pixels and then the width of 120. I'll leave the actual details up to you. Whatever you want to do in your application is in your control here. So I also want to make sure that the control buttons are small. So control container, image. I want to make sure to actually restyle these. So we're just going to set a height and width of 20 pixels. So we just want to shrink those down a little bit just so they look a little bit more proper. Save that. And let's just go ahead and test it. So here we go. So that video frame is much smaller. So if I adjust this, there we go. When we get to 600 pixels, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so for some reason, the control containers don't seem like they're resizing. I think they are. I just can't really tell. Let's just try doing this at like 1 pixel or 10 pixels. Let's just see. Okay, so that's actually working. That's good. That's just the button here. Okay, I guess I could adjust the padding, but we're not gonna focus on that. Okay, so we're about to get to the video quality, but before we finish this up, I also want to style that form here. So what I'm gonna do here is actually copy and paste some values. So I don't want to focus on HTML and CSS in a WebRTC tutorial. So I'll just go ahead and add in some of the main template code, and then we'll style this up. I'll just paste in some CSS, or I guess we'll just see how things go. So we're going to create a main container here, and we're going to call this lobby container. So lobby container, and that's going to wrap the entire page. And inside of this main tag right here, we're going to create a div, and this will be the form container. So we're going to do ID. That's going to be form-container. And if you're looking for the actual code here, you can just go ahead and check out the GitHub repo, and that'll all be in there so you can see the actual examples. So in here, inside of the form container, we want a header. So we're going to do form container header. So form underscore container, then we'll do underscore header. And these are double underscores. So in here, I'm just going to paste in a value. So we're just going to throw in a p tag, and it's going to have this wave emoji here, and it's going to say create a new form. So after that, we're going to go ahead and create another section for the actual form. So we're going to create another div, and we're going to go ahead and call this form content wrapper. So give it an ID of form double underscore content, and then we'll do double underscore wrapper, and the form itself will actually go in here. So let's take this join form, copy that, remove it, and paste it into form content wrapper. Okay, so that should be it for the actual template. So let's go back in here, and let's go ahead and leave the page. Here is our form, and let's actually add in the CSS now. So we'll open up lobby.css. So in lobby CSS, we're going to go ahead and add in some background color to the body. So I'm going to paste in some code. So that'll give it a dark background. So I'll save this, and we'll just check this out. So that changes the styling here. So once we have that, we'll take the form container. So I'm going to paste in some more code here. So it's going to be the form container centered with a width here. So we have a border radius, a background color, and we position it in the center. So if we open this up, here is our form container. We'll just go ahead and bring this down. And again, I'm doing this for the sake of speeding up the video because this is not what we want to focus on. So the next thing I want to style is going to be the actual form container header. So in lobby.css, we'll throw that in. We're going to add in some border radius, a different background for the actual form header, some font size, and so on. So here we go. We see that container there. And for the form content wrapper, we'll add in some padding. So we're going into form content wrapper. Let's save that. We're going to add in some padding, and then the actual input fields. So we're going to go ahead and grab two input values. So we're getting the actual input field here. We're styling it up, and we're going to change the submit button to be purple. Okay, so that looks much better, and that is our join form. So let's say we want to join a room. We'll just call this 123 again. We'll join. Here is our page, and when we go back, that looks a lot better. Okay, so the last thing we have to do here is actually add in some quality to this video chat here. So let's go ahead and fix this up here. So this is going to be very easy. All we're going to do is go ahead and add in some constraints here. So we'll go into main.js here, and I'm going to create a variable just above my init function, and I'm going to call this constraints. So constraints, and we're just going to go ahead and throw this into, let's actually fix this up real quick. So we have our constraints, and we're just going to throw this into our get user media function. So let's see, where is that? That was on create peer connection. Oh no, that was, I think it was in the init function. Yeah, right here. So we're just going to go ahead and throw this in here. We'll take all those constraints and throw those in here, and let's just go ahead and recreate these. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and set the video. So instead of just setting video and audio to true or false, we're actually going to add in some values. So when we add the values, it'll be assumed that these values are true. So we'll go ahead and throw in the width of our video. And what we can do is set a minimum value. So we'll do min as 640 for the frame size. And then we'll set an ideal width. This is what we actually want our frame to be. And we'll set that to 1920. And then for the max, we're going to set this to 1920. So ideally, we want that video as big as possible, because when we load it up in here, we want to make sure that it's not stretching a small video frame. So that's why the quality is so bad right now, besides maybe other settings, but we're not going to deal with anything else other than height and width here. So we'll set the width, and then we're going to set the height here. So let's just go ahead and copy all of this. We'll change this to height. And for this, the min is going to be 480. So we're making a rectangle, and then we're going to do 1080 and 1080. And then for the audio, we're just going to set that to true. That's going to be it. So this is how you can actually adjust it. So we just specify values for our video. So we throw in this entire object and we throw that into get user media. So now if I save this, let's look at the difference. So look at the video quality. It's more zoomed out now. The frame is bigger and everything looks a lot better. So that's it for this project. We are done with this application, and what I want to do next is spend a moment talking about group video calling with WebRTC. So at this point, our application only handles 2 users, so it's just peer-to-peer, and group video calling is an entirely different topic in WebRTC, and there's multiple ways we can go about doing this. So we're not going to build anything out, but I do want to give you a high-level overview of how to handle that before we move on to the next